In this show, we're talking Eldritch Moon's mechanics. We'll find out why things are about to escalate, why chestbursters suddenly seem all warm and cuddly, and why 2 is indeed bigger than 1. Here comes the number science.
So Emerge is a new ability found on Eldritch Moon, some of the larger Eldrazi creatures. It's an ability that lets you cast them even earlier by sacrificing a creature. So now you can pay the mana cost, just like always, cast it. Or if you have a creature to spare, you sacrifice that creature, and now you're paying the Emerge cost, but you also get an additional discount, namely the converted mana cost of the creature you sacrificed. So for example, Wretched Gryff has a mana cost of 7 and an Emerge cost of 5U. So if it's late game, you got 7 mana lying around, cast it like normal, no problem. Now if you want to cast it a little bit ahead of schedule, you sacrifice a creature. Let's say you sacrifice one with converted mana cost 3. Well, now you're paying the Emerge cost, 5U minus 3, it's only 2U for Wretched Gryff. It's a great deal. You draw a card and have a nice big flyer on the battlefield.
Emerge offers a lot of really cool and fun gameplay because unlike an ability where if it just said sacrifice a creature, the first thing you would look for is, what is the smallest, most useful of this creature I can sacrifice this thing? And certainly you can do that to Emerge, and all the Emerge costs are automatically 1 less to account for that if you want to just sack your, your smallest token. But what's more fun is if we give you reasons to sack larger creatures. So when you get an Emerge creature that might cost 7 or 8 mana, well, you can sack a 1-drop. It doesn't really help you out that much. I mean, it helps. But, what if you could sack a 4-drop that had, say, a pacifism on it? Well, that's even better. Or what about a creature where, the majority of the mana you paid for it really is its enter the battlefield trigger. It comes into play, you get the enter the battlefield trigger. Now it's just kind of sitting there doing nothing. Well, what if inside of it was a giant monster? That just sounds so much more useful.
So I kind of wanted to push them in different directions, as cards like Distended Mindbender point you towards this kind of mid-range grinding your opponent down style of gameplay, whereas cards like Elder Deep Fiend and Lashweed Lurker are a lot more tempo-oriented and want you to kind of take advantage of the extra time that they buy you, and you're more trading cards for time instead of cards for more cards.
One awesome new weapon the Eldrazi are bringing in Eldritch Moon are Meld cards. Now, you've been battling with creatures in Magic for a long time, and they've all had one thing in common. They're a single card. With Meld, no longer. Each Meld pair is 2 specific cards, for example, Graph Rats and Midnight Scavengers. Now, if they see each other on the battlefield, if you own and control both of them, they're going to exile themselves and then meld. Turn over and it's like a puzzle piece that you're putting together. You get Chittering Host. It enters the battlefield and is completely bonkers. There are 3 specific meld pairs to look for, and I don't even know what that is. It's 2 cards. It's crazy.
Suddenly, we had transform technology in this block because it's Innistrad. And if you have 2 cards, but now on the back, they're 1 card, the game is a lot more okay with it. And everyone said, I don't know, this is scary territory. We know it's real dangerous. But, okay, what happens if you unsummon it? Well, okay, that can be answered. All of those things that were so problematic when it started as 2 permanents sitting there side by side, really once you flipped them over and they became 1, a lot of those started to disappear or could get answers, and it's such a spectacular way to show that Emrakul transformation that we knew from very early on we really wanted to push on this and try to make it happen.
We made the Meld cards in design, and when it got handed over to development, there's some skepticism. I mean, we're asking a lot. This is a pretty weird mechanic. But I remember, Sam Stoddard, who was the lead developer, he and I met just to sort of, as head designer, I always meet to sort of give my impression of stuff. And so I said to Sam, Sam, here's the one thing I know. I go, the Meld cards have to stay. You have to do the Meld cards. They are the coolest thing in the set. I go, trust me, the audience is going to love this. Whatever you do, figure out a way to keep the Meld cards.
So the 3 meld pairs are actually targeted differently. So the Midnight Scavengers and Graph Rats, they are sort of trying to get you to draft them in limited. So if you see one, you might be able to get the other one on a wheel or in the second booster pack. So that's something you should be once in a while attainable while you're playing limited. The Hanweir Garrison and Battlements and Bruna and Gisela are there to try to make your constructed deck stronger with a sweet payoff that you can get if you go deep and try to get both of them on the battlefield.
So Hanweir Battlements and Hanweir Garrison are, I think, really good examples of cards that do stand alone on their own power, but then also give you a really formidable threat if you want to combine them. You know, the land is just great in any deck where you have big creatures, especially, that you want to give haste and surprise attack your opponent out of nowhere. And the creature is just a lot of value attacking and constantly producing more 1/1s. One thing that we did very intentionally with this pair was one of them is a land, which is a less vulnerable type of permanent. So it's easier to assemble these two together than it is to put some of them together, because you can play them in sort of whatever order you want. You can play the land out early and it's not at risk of dying and breaking up your combo.
Early on in the concept work for Shadows over Innistrad block, one of our concept artists drew this two-headed Eldrazi angel thing, and we all kind of went, ugh. And it's one of those sets where when you go, you know, you're on to something. So we saved that. Now, I don't know whether the idea of Bruna and Gisela merging predated that and came together with it nicely, or if it came out of that. But either way, we had this idea that we loved of these two merging. And then when this mechanic came along that is actually about two cards becoming one huge, creepy Eldrazi card, we thought, okay, that's perfect. That's really exciting to see. And we knew from very early on that the marquee meld card was going to have to be Bruna and Gisela merging into this monstrosity Brizella.
You can see in the design that Gisela is this sort of smaller angel that you might play many copies of in a deck and play her early, and she's very good at attacking and blocking and having a big presence on the board. Whereas Bruna is this more late game card that you might play less copies of in a deck, and it's sort of like a backup plan if they deal with your Gisela. It's like, oh, I had this 4-power flying lifelink first strike, you dealt with it, well, now later in the game I'm going to play Bruna, bring it back, and meld them into this, as I said, Eldrazi angel monster that just finishes off your opponent.
So you may know about modal spells. These are instants and sorceries, sometimes abilities that have more than one effect that you choose from. You get like a bulleted list and you choose which one you want. With Escalate, you can kick things up 1 or 2 notches. You can pay a little bit extra for your spell and you can start adding modes, adding effects. So pay the mana cost, you get to choose 1 mode. Pay the mana cost plus the Escalate cost, you get to add a mode. If there's 3 options available, pay the Escalate cost twice plus the mana cost, you can have all 3.
Escalate was a mechanic that we added partway through development as we were looking for a kind of interesting, especially constructed pointing mechanic that was thought-provoking and a little bit more mechanical and a little bit less weird. For people that didn't necessarily buy into the kind of weirdness of meld or the high cost for the emerged creatures, Escalate provided just a space to tell this story of the Gatewatch rising to the occasion, and let us just make kind of these cool, interesting, thought-provoking constructive pointing cards.
The flavor is unlikely alliances of tribes and planeswalkers getting together to fight these Eldrazi horrors that would otherwise wreck the entire plane of Innistrad.
One of the biggest challenges when we decided we were going to go back to Innistrad was living up to the expectations, and especially in regards to the limited environment and the draft, where original Innistrad is heralded as one of the best draft formats of all time. I think with the reception that Shadows over Innistrad has gotten, it's living up. I don't know if I'll ever say anything can compare, but I'm definitely very proud of what we did with Shadows over Innistrad, and I think it's a very worthy successor. And one of the things I'm really excited about for Eldritch Moon is that I do feel like it finishes things out very strongly on a good note and does the whole returning block a lot of good justice.